everyone to joining us for this student seminar on feminism and its offshoots. So we are absolutely thrilled to see the diverse and enthusiastic group of people who are here to celebrate our student seminar. So allow me to introduce myself. I am Afia Jana Anindita, and I have the privilege today to serve you as the host for this seminar. So to begin with, let's all have a round of applause to welcome all the wonderful participants of today who have gathered here to share their ideas with us. So, thank you all for their dedicated work, and it was very thoughtful that they are bringing their ideas with us and sharing us today. So this seminar has been arranged because we want to learn together. We want to learn from each other and to support one another to work towards a more inclusive and equitable world further. So together we are stronger, and together we can make a difference. Thank you for your presence. So for me, feminism is not merely an ideology. It is a powerful force for change. It has a lens, it is the lens through which we can examine and reshape our society. It's a striving force for the world where every individual, and regardless of gender, class, and should have the more equal opportunity to reach their fullest potential. So now, without further ado, let's kick off our student seminar with a dynamic start. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Aninda.
And today I'll be presenting on Chowdhury's film, Devi, as a counter-narrative to the spiritual constructs of women. So I don't think I need to introduce you to who Chowdhury is. I mean, everybody knows the master of Bengali art house cinema. So I'm just gonna tell you what to expect from my presentation. First, I'm gonna give you an overview of the film, and also I'll talk about the two theories that are connected to the film. One is of Patriarchy, and the other one is of Simone de Beauvoir's. And also I'm gonna show you race cinematic elements through parts of my video essay that I created for this paper. So let's get started with the plot and the characters. So this film is set in the 19th century rural Bengal, and we'll see an aged landlord. You can see Kali Kinkar. He is Kali Kinkar Roy, and he lives in this palace-like house with his two sons, Uma Prasad and Tara Prasad. Tara Prasad is the eldest son, and Harashundari is his wife, and they both have a son named Koga. All of these characters play a vital role in the film. And then we have the main protagonist, Doyamoyi, played by none other than Sharmila Thakur. And she is actually the newly married wife of Uma Prasad, and they have been married for like 3 years. So the plot basically revolves around all these characters, but we will see Kali Kinkar playing a huge role because he is the main patriarchal force in this film. How? He is a devotee of Kali, Kali the mother goddess, and he is his extreme religious beliefs. This basically runs the whole plot. And Uma Prasad is like the complete opposite of Kali Kinkar. He is the modern man, the nationalist man who basically goes out to, he's studying in Kolkata, he gets college education, and so Kali Kinkar is the traditional man, whereas his son is the modern man. And Doyamoyi, she is portrayed as a very mild, timid, innocent sort of woman. So as the story progresses, we see Uma Prasad away from home, studying in Kolkata, and Doyamoyi. So every single character, they're very dependent upon Doyamoyi, especially the main characters. And so Kali Kinkar once has a dream that in his dream he sees Doyamoyi basically turning into a goddess, and he turns this into a real story. He basically imposes this goddess identity upon her, and and he makes everyone worship her. So there were people coming from their villages. All of them just came and started worshipping her as a little goddess. So so at first glance this movie may seem to look at the generational conflict between tradition and modern, but it goes beyond that. And as it explores the tension between fanaticism as an extreme religious belief and also freedom, so it criticizes how the patriarchal power and the religious dogmatism victimized women during that period and also everyone around her. So I'm gonna walk you through some visuals. So this is the very opening scene. You can see a clay idol turning into the jewelry-clad goddess of Mother Durga. And it is basically foreshadowing Doya's metamorphosis from an ordinary woman to a little goddess. And also it's sort of like a miniature of the film. And then, like I said before, Doya is always surrounded by male figures a lot. So you can see that Doya, both of them, Kalikinkar and Koka, they see a mother figure inside her. And all of these actually sort of bounce her in a sort of sphere, and her movement, her speech, her sexuality, all of these are being governed by these patriarchal forces. And also this leads to her loss of identity at the very end of the film, as she completely loses her identity and she suffers from a denial of self-knowledge that neither religion or rationalism could fix. So I'm gonna go and talk about the theories now. So those of you who don't know about this theory, I'm gonna try to be as easier as I can. So this theory is from Patriarchy's The Nationalist Resolution of the Women's Question. He basically talks about the nationalist ideologies regarding the core and bahir, the material and spiritual. So the material is related to the bahir, the outside world, and this is a space governed by men only. So men go out, they get educated, they do office works, they run the government. So the outside sphere, men. And he connects the inside sphere to women, and this is a nationalist ideology that women should protect the inner sphere, the private space. And they sort of romanticize this idea of women portraying the private space. They said that women have these godlike qualities, that women are like goddesses. So it may sound like, oh, that's a really nice compliment, but it's actually not. It is a very patriarchal construction to keep women inside, to keep women bound within the within home. So yeah, in the film you'll see Doya always being in the inner space. She's always inside, whereas her husband, he's going out, he's getting educated, he's going to theaters, hanging out with friends, and so on. And the next theory is of similarly reversed. It is from her book, The Second Sex. So it's going to give you an idea of the spiritual aspects of women. She said that these are created from sort of myths. These are based on society and history. And that she says that she is everything that men cannot be or what they long for. So I used this quote because think about Kali Kinkar having the dream of Doya turning into the mother goddess. He sort of desired this sort of reincarnation of a mother goddess, and he imposed that idea upon his daughter-in-law just because she's sort of mute. She doesn't speak that much because, according to the context, she was a very silent woman. And it also expresses how the spirituality and mysticism is done by men to basically subdue women's position in the society, and also keeping them away from defining the patriarchal power, like I said. And she also explains that this sort of absurd fanaticism, the extreme belief in religion, sort of makes people to lose sight of reality. Just what happened in the film. All of them lost this sight of reality that Doya was basically a human being, but they all made him a goddess. So let's bridge theory and film. Both Bovar and Chowdhury shed light on the unjust subordination of women behind the religious dogma and traditional ideologies set forth by the patriarchal society. But Ray then takes one step further, and through his ingenious filmmaking, he visualizes how dire this victimization can be for a woman. And you see it through his lens that how terrible it is. You will actually feel very uncomfortable when you watch the film. And so according to Tanya Roy, she's an ornament akin to a religious idol that decorates the halls of this upper class household to serve the sensibilities of the patriarch. So before she was even recognized as a human being, she was turned into a goddess. So these are some of Ray's cinematic elements. I'll show it to you in the video essay. So, but before you watch it, you'll see how with very minimal dialogue, Sharmila Thakur subtly portrays the innocence, the hopelessness through her character, and also you'll see fear, you'll see unease and isolation, all of these portraying through the character. And so Ray also uses silence as a very important element that we'll also see in the essay. So I'm going to move to the... I hope this clears all of
denying her identity, if she was actually human or an actual goddess. সুকাল কি বলছো আমার স্ত্রীর উপর দেবী তো আর মানে তার বুকে পাথর চাপা দিয়েছে আপনি তাদের আপনার কি স্বার্থ দিতে জানি না
Transformed from an ordinary woman to a goddess to actually be insane. Very
incredible voices in the field of feminism here as today. So now, moving forward with our seminar, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Anindita Rhine, Anindita Hossain Rhine. So,
Anindita Hossain Rhine, and what I'll be talking about is Prodipta. Now, Provati already talked about how females, about goddesses and the denial of this and everything. But what we see in the tale of Bibi is something very interesting, very unique, and something that isn't really talked about as much as it should be talked about. So let's first, Bibi starts as a myth. It's a myth in the Sundarbans. And well, it kind of moves upwards and turns into something that comes out as something beyond a myth. Now, so firstly, to talk about who is Bibi. Specifically, I'll be talking about Bibi in Amitav Ghosh's literary landscape. So this is in his recently published illustrated novel, Junglenama, as well as the Hungry Guide. And within this, we see Bibi. Firstly, Bibi is something that was originally composed in the 19th century by Munshi Muhammad Khatir in something called the Bibi Junglenama. And then it was a Bengali epic that has now been adapted in doing this by Amitav Ghosh. So Junglenama is really just a very small extract of the original tale. The original tale extracted tale in Junglenama has the story of Rhine, who is this very scary, malevolent spirit who is in the form of a tiger. I'll introduce him later on, who plagues the lands of Sundarbans, and he basically he takes control of the natural world as well as the human world. And then Bibi, in the midst of this chaos, we see Bibi and her brother Chowdhury coming in and being the saviors. But here, Bibi is the one who takes the center stage. Later on, we see this story, which is the main story of Junglenama, of Dhona, who kind of shows the colonial mindset of wanting to take the natural resources and take it for his own wealth and gain. And then he takes his poor cousin Dukhi to join him in this process of exploitation. And then in this exchange, we see that Rai captures Dhona, who exchanges Dukhi's life to save himself, which is when Bibi comes to rescue. So I'll talk about that later on. Now, before I talk about Bibi as a figure who really subverts the idea of gender discourse or subjugation of females, I'd first talk about patriarchal structures in the legend of Bibi, because there are patriarchal structures. We can never go without patriarchal structures. And the first main character is obviously Dokkin, right? Who's this anthropomorphic spirit. This is not really the proper illustration, but he's a tiger who comes in the form, avatar of a tiger, and he's someone who hunts, who prays, who takes everything. There's no hesitance. He just takes whatever he can get, and he's just essentially the archetype of a tyrannical, patriarchal figure. And then Amitav Ghosh also in his book really beautifully illustrates him with this fiery intensity. He's someone who clutches and exudes with burning fire, and he's just the entire illustration is someone who's just blazing with intensity, and that's the patriarchal structure present within this landscape. And then we see Dhona, who plagues the human landscape. So we have the natural landscape plagued by this patriarchal character, and then we have the human landscape, which is plagued by Dhona, whose name is the rich one. And he maintains materialistic pursuits, as I said. He sees the Shundarbans as a land with plenty of ecological resources that he can just go about, take, and this is his. And then we also see, when we see Dukhi, whose name translates to the sad one, he leaves him ashore. He also makes a promise to Dukhi's mother that he wouldn't leave him, or he would safeguard him. But then when he returns without Dukhi, Dukhi's mother pleads to him, and he said, "I'll pay off your son with the money I gain." And that's really just the colonial spirit that we see. Human life really does not matter much. He essentially nullifies the voice of the marginalized here. But then we see Bibi. And here, again, before we talk about how Bibi transgresses or subverts the female subjugation or this female condition, we first have to look into Simone de Beauvoir and what she talks about. Simone de Beauvoir has said that women are essentially the other to men. We never can read tales, myths, and literature without seeing women as being in relation to a man. He is the subject, he is the absolute, and she is the complementary other. And yet she also gives us a hope, a form of liberation as well. She says that it is possible to rise above this subjugated state if we recognize that there is a reciprocal state of otherness, that both the man and the woman can see each other as equal components, as both object and subject in a reciprocal manner. And this is what we see in the legend of Bibi. So when we see Bibi's tale being surrounded by all of these patriarchal structures, or patriarchal characters, Bibi still shines as someone else. Obviously, Dokkin Rai and Dhoni, Bibi can be mentioned as the other for Dokkin Rai and Dhoni, but then again, Dokkin Rai and Dhoni are also the other to Bibi. She comes here, and whenever she comes into the scene, she very clearly mutes Dokkin Rai's power, and she immediately takes up what Dhoni's power and voice. She is also the equal other, perhaps even perhaps someone whose power is greatly elevated because of these patriarchal figures. So what is essentially coming up with Bibi is a state of great empowerment, where she, another thing we see is that she comes and she easily can hunt, she easily can pray, she easily can and can take control as well. So all of these typical patriarchal notions that we associate with the previous characters, she easily encompasses them as well. And then we have her quote, "I am the queen of the forest, I am its keeper." So now, what is important in on Bibi's tale is that it's a tale that has to be. What's interesting in Bon Bibi's tale is that it's a syncretic tale. Bon Bibi's tale comes with. So we see that this isn't just a tale in Junglenama, it's also present in the Sundarban's lifestyle as well. Bon Bibi's tale pulsates with their lifeblood. It's not a myth to them. For the Sundarbans, Bon Bibi is their livelihood. When these people go out to secure their livelihood by going into these deep waters and forests, and they're endangering their lives, they trust Bon Bibi to protect them. And this is where this great image of Bon Bibi comes in. Furthermore, she's also syncretic in the sense that she comes from Arabia, but she's worshipped by Muslims and Hindus equally. And there's absolutely no political or any form of religious conflict here. They both pride her. I once saw a documentary while researching on this, and one woman said, when the matter comes to life and death, we don't really care whether she's a Muslim or a Hindu figure. We really just care about who can save us and who can look after us. And that's Bon Bibi. And now, how can Bon Bibi really change the gender discourse, or how can she change what we've traditionally seen? Well, firstly, we have to go back to Butler here, because Beauvoir states that the condition of women is already created, it's already constructed. One does not become a woman becomes a woman, it's constructed. But Butler sees that it's a continuous process, that the female identity it's an ongoing process. It can be, it can be constructed through a continuous process of performance. And she also states that, if we do repeat these, what kind of subversive repetition should we bring out to make this regulatory practice, or the traditional ideas of female and male change itself, the identity of this change itself. And this is where I want to talk about, why is Bon Bibi's syncretic, why is her syncretic values important? This is an excerpt from The Hungry Type, where the character Nirmal, he sees the Bon Bibi legend, the actual Junglenama, and he realizes that the Bon Bibi legend has come throughout years of migration and languages. And it's existed in a number of faiths and languages and areas. So it's been repeated and reinforced. It's not something new and novel or something, it's repeated and reinforced. Meaning that Bon Bibi has existed as this powerful subversive force, and we haven't really opened our eyes to her yet. So essentially, how does Bon Bibi change herself from being the other to the empowered? She doesn't. In fact, what's really interesting that I find within this, with Amitav Ghosh's writing, is that he never pushes Bon Bibi to be a subversive force. He puts her as she is, and she is a figure who is an environmental stewardess, who is a protectress, who performs her duty first, and whose dominion is the land and its people and the animals. And that's her identity. And then comes her identity as a woman. It's the woman identity. It's even if we revere her because she's an esoteric figure that stands for the voices of the marginalized people. And then after this, she is also this person of limitless power, and she has no inhibition to her power. And therefore, So this is where we see that by when Butler asks the question of, what kind of subversive traits do we see that Bibi's status as a revered goddess and the voice of the marginalized people in ecological matters, these inherent traits of women being subjugated or not having a nullified voice are immediately deconstructed within her identity. We see that gendered identities that have been historically constructed become more secondary to the gender performances that are now repeated within legends such as the Bibi legends. So, in the end, this is my personal view, is that we kind of see a new meaning coming out of the second sex by Beauvoir. The second sex, for me at this moment after researching on Bibi and everything, it's become less connotative of females as the secondary sex. I don't think we can look into that anymore. I feel like the othered or the secondary sex has now just become the sex, which is what you're biologically born with. In this landscape where we have characters who are identified through their powers and subversive qualities, these traditional gender norms of female and male have been gradually dismantled. And by highlighting intrinsic qualities such as being the voice, such as Bibi being the voice of marginalized people and being the protectors of nature, gender discourse has kind of changed away from sex nature, where your identity is not what you're biologically born with, but now it's become more of where gender has become more of a component of an overall performative study, where what you act yourself to be is more important than who you are biologically. So obviously Bibi is still the mother, she's still the female matron to nature and humans, but this identity subsumes her identity as the protectress to both nature and humans. Bibi is really an embodiment of feminist resistance, but this is only made possible because we first identify her as a force of nature that is prevalent and profound, instead of assigning existing gender norms to her identity. She is a figure of transformation, but more importantly, she establishes female strength and power as an intrinsic as an intrinsic quality of the female identity. And that's her subversive trait. Thank you.
I am just processing all of these things. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending warm welcome for the next speaker, who is Prodipta Hasin. So, ready to absorb your wisdom.
Hello everyone, my name is Prodipta Azim, and today I'm going to talk about a significant but often overlooked part of our Bengali history. I'm going to talk about two women. I want you to look at these names, Shanti, Ghosh and Suniti Chowdhury, and I want you all to remember their names today, because most of the people in our country, most of the people in the subcontinent, they do not. Even though both of these women were very revolutionary to the anti-British movement of the 1947. So let's start our presentation with a quote from Bibi. Now we all know that I'm pretty sure not all of us have heard of Shanti Ghosh and Suniti Chowdhury, but I'm sure almost everybody of us know Bibi. So if I may, I would like to read this quote aloud, which is, "Females are determined that they will no more lag behind and stand side by side with their brothers in any activities, however dangerous or difficult. I earnestly hope that my sisters will no more think of themselves weaker and will get themselves ready to face all dangers and difficulties and join the revolutionary movement in their thousands." This quote embodies the fact that how a woman has as much as obligation as men in protecting and fighting for their own country. And here Bibi urges these women, her fellow sisters in nation, to come forward and take up weapons to protect their motherland. So we know that women's participation in the anti-British movement started with Gandhi's non-violent activities, but in the 1920s and 1930s, it changed and it took a completely different shape. During the 1920s, all across Bengal, there were these bursts of revolutionary activities. And there were women who participated in these revolutionary activities. They worked both in the front lines and behind the scenes. They smuggled weapons, they transported secret messages, they assassinated and attempted to assassinate various British government officials. Even they gave shelters to their fellow male revolutionaries at the cost of social scandal and their own personal safety. They quite literally defied the concept of a new woman. Now, what is this new woman? This is a concept that was talked about by the historian Chairperson Dr. This new woman is Patriarchy says that this new woman is the expectations of the internationalists regarding the women of India. According to him, this new woman was the epitome of Indian traditional identities and a complete rejection to everything that was Western, or the idea of Westernizations. But female revolutionaries like Shanti, Ghosh and Chowdhury, they were the literal opposite of this idea of a new woman. Now let's go back a few years and introduce ourselves to these two characters, Shanti Ghosh and Chowdhury. So Shanti Ghosh was born in a very politically conscious family. Her father was a philosophy professor in Kumilla College, and she grew up in that. Her father used to teach her all these patriotic songs. He used to take her to his own political meetings, and so you can imagine, like, growing up in such a family. Since childhood, she was very inspired, and she was determined to do something for herself and her nation. On the other hand, Chowdhury, she was inspired by revolutionaries from her hometown Kumilla, revolutionaries like Dr. and Brahma. Both of these girls were students of Kumilla Foizunasa Girls College, and when they were in their high schools, one of them were 14 years old and another one was 15 years old. They were appointed to the political group Jugantor in Kumilla by Profullo Brahma because of their spiritedness. Profullo first came across these girls because they were very vocal about their idea of a free country, or their idea about a nation which is free from the British colonial rule. So Profullo gave them some banned literature, political pamphlets for their own engagement, and then she went ahead and introduced Shanti and Suniti to the leader of the Jugantor group in Kumilla, whose name was Akhil Nandi. Akhil Nandi met these two girls, and even though they were like teenage girls who were barely out of school, he was very inspired to engage these girls to their cause, because they were very, as I said, they were very vocal and they were very passionate about this cause. But as you can imagine, since they were young and inexperienced, they started their works by doing the non-violent activities or non-violent engagements of the political group. But since both of these women, Shanti and Suniti, both of them were very spirited and very courageous, so with their usual confidence, they went ahead and said that we want to participate in the front line. We want to go ahead, we want to do what the boys are doing, we want to do what the men are doing here. So obviously the leaders at first, they were very reluctant to let go of these two teenage girls into the front lines. But then they said something that I find very inspiring. This Shanti and Suniti pledged their case to Akhil Nandi, saying that did the boys attain success in all their attempts? Is there no one who has failed? We will set a new example. And indeed, they did set a new example. They successfully assassinated the district magistrate of Kumilla while they were like 14 and 15 years old. So if you go back to the day, this day of assassination, they were actually the first revolutionaries who successfully assassinated a British official of the government. On the day of December 13, 1931, they left their home by saying that they were going to school for their special Bengali examinations. their family had no idea that they left their home with the sole objective of assassinating this very, very, very prominent person. They went to the district magistrate's bungalow directly. They went in front of him with the excuse that they needed the district magistrate's signature for a petition to open a swimming pool in their school. When they got close enough, they were very brave about it. It was December, right? So it's winter time. They were wearing shawls and they had these revolvers inside their shawls. They hid the revolvers inside their shawls. Can you imagine these 14 or 15-year-old girls, how much brave and how much confident they have to be in their abilities or in their belief for a free nation or a free country to be so bold and so brave. So they went ahead, and when they got a close enough shot, both of them took out their weapon and shot the district magistrate at the same time. As you can imagine, chaos ensued. They were arrested right on spot and they were transferred to the local prisons. Because they were very young in age, so they couldn't be sent to the Andaman's jails where the usual revolutionary prisoners were sent, but they were imprisoned in the local jails. And believe it or not, Shanti and Suniti, both of them were very much disheartened and less than satisfied with this result. They went into that bungalow, they went in front of the district magistrate, they went with the idea that they are going to become martyrs that day. They were going to be killed that day. So, yeah, so that's something. Imagine you're a schoolgirl and you have this notion just to protect your country that I'm going to die today and I'm fine with it if my country is free, if my country is not even free, one step closer to free. So this is something I find absolutely inspiring. So you would think that as a colonized nation, obviously the British government is going to be very much opposed to this whole idea and everything. But you'd think at least the locals would be supportive to this idea. But no, they were not supportive to this idea at all. Even they went so far as to paint these two young girls, to paint them as the villains of the story. The reason why the locals were so opposed to the idea was rooted in Indian nationalism. Now I'm going to refer back to the idea of new women once again. According to the new nationalist discourse in India, during the same time period that was parallelly happening with the revolutionary activities, was that this new women was very much different from the ordinary women, who was crude, impolite, noisy, argumentative, lacking in superior moral sense, sexually explicit, and the target of severe physical abuse by men. So Shanti and Suniti and other revolutionaries clearly defied this concept by going out of their house, by taking up weapons, by literally standing in front of a person, standing in front of the oppressor and shooting them in the face. So you can imagine how this completely went against the idea of new women for a new nation. The president of Indian National Congress said that it is a heinous crime and unbecoming of the traditions of Indian women. The locals went so far as to say that these women were the confrontation of westernization of Indian culture. They were saying that they were they were manipulating Indian culture with their Western thoughts. Historian Geraldine H. Forbes, she also says that these women who participated in these movements, in this revolutionary movement specifically, were seen as acting very unnaturally. The British coined these women. I mean, if you see a powerful woman who goes against your idea, even now, what's the first thing you say to stop that woman? Oh my God, she mixes with a lot of boys. She goes out wearing not enough clothes. So the British went ahead and did the same thing. Years ago, they used to say that these girls who were participating in these revolutionary movements were street girls or prostitutes or mistresses. And this is something that obviously affected the mentality of the fellow revolutionaries, not only the women but also the men, because it was a huge obstacle in their revolutionary activities. Another Bengali newspaper, Provati, said that such assassinations cannot be the methods through which a country gains freedom. In a country where young girls are participating in murder, the situation is repulsive. So this new ideology of nationalism was protective and very preserved in everything that is traditional to India. So it includes every sort of social idea, every form of social practices, including that of womanhood. So many women revolutionaries during the 20th century, including Shanti, Ghosh and Suniti Chowdhury, they quite literally defied this concept of new women that I just talked about. The new patriarchy promoted by nationalism gave these women a sense of new social obligations. I mean, when you're coining the term new women for a new nation, you are subjugating these women to a new form of patriarchy, a new form of enslavement, which is completely legal and inspired by the nationalists, the Indian nationalists, your people from your own country, not even the colonial government. So, this was, according to the historian Partha Chatterjee, was a very historical aim of sovereignty. So the ideal Indian women, according to Partha Chatterjee's essay, the Indian nationalists said that the ideal Indian woman was educated, pure, modest, a good mother, and a good wife. She was firmly against any idea of using violence. So obviously women who were using violence to protect their country, to work for freedom, they were defined as someone acting unnaturally, as someone who isn't a nice girl, for that matter. But this trajectory of women changed when women from middle class all across Indian subcontinent, but mainly in Bengal, since Bengal was kind of a hub for these kinds of revolutionary activities, these women defied these social norms by learning how to use lathi, ride a bicycle, row and swim, and many of them even escaped from their home with their fellow male revolutionaries to participate in the movements. They smuggled weapons, ran away with other participants, and even when confronted with the law enforcement, right on the spot, they planned an escape and something like that. So I would like to say that these women, these revolutionary women, I mean, we talk a lot about the women who participated in the nationalist movements, in the salt marches with Gandhi or the textile boycott. We talk about them a lot, and even after 1947, after 1971, those women were very much talked about, very much researched on. But the research on revolutionary women who literally took up weapons to protect their country was not as much as talked about. This is a very new aspect of history that has been just recently been researched and studied upon. So I would like to end my presentation with a quote from one of our heroines of this presentation, Shanti Ghosh. When talking about their objectives of why they did what they did, she said that our mission was to rouse the women in India by our deeds, defiance and courage in successful action. This extraordinary display of resistance signified a brand new understanding not only of womanhood but also of patriotism. So even though these women are often left out of the history, and often they're ignored and neglected and not often as much as talked about their fellow male revolutionaries or their fellow female freedom fighters who were in the nationalist side of the movement, I would really like to conclude my presentation by saying that their contribution to the history of Bengal, their contribution to the history of India is something that should be researched more on, and it is something that we should all try to remember more. So that's it from my presentation.
Actually, I didn't know about them a lot. I had read about them, but not that intense. So we are running out of time, I think. So let's moving right along with our program and our seminar. So our fourth speaker is none other than Raina. So the floor is yours.
So hi everyone, my name is Raina Isabela and I'm going to be presenting my paper titled Denaturalized Genders in Paston Statovci's Crossing, Parody of Becoming and Performance. So to begin with, what is gender? The 20th century saw the radical distinction between sex and gender. For Simone de Beauvoir, who wrote The Second Sex in 1949, gender is a process of acquirement through socialization. Whereas for Judith Butler, who wrote Gender Trouble in 1990, gender is a discontinuous identity constructed through a stylized repetition of acts determined through culture. Through both of their definitions, and when we move forward to the 21st century, we're going to see that gender as a discourse is constantly in motion. So for Beauvoir, the becoming is a process of socialization. When she says that one is not born a woman but becomes one, she means gender identity is acquired through feminine and masculine lived experiences and rejects biological determinism. However, we have to remember that it is still second sex is still a product of the 1940s and 50s, so becoming is still envisioned in the binary. One should not misinterpret becoming as a possibility for the woman to become another gender by reading that she becomes one, because that is not what Simone de Beauvoir intended it to be. She talks about the man as the subject, the absolute woman as the other, or an asymmetrical relationship of male domination and female subordination. This dichotomy relies on a failed synthesis between the subject and the other, and limiting the possibilities of non-binary genders. So we can ask, is it possible to exist as both the subject and the other? To answer that, or to investigate this question a bit further, we're going to use Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity. So her theory on gender performativity can be summated through a quote from Nietzsche that she quotes herself, is that there is no being behind doing, affecting, and becoming. The doer is merely a fiction added to the deed. The deed is everything. So gender is culturally constructed and depends on a repetition of actions or bodily gestures. There are critiques on her theory of gender performativity, which can be split into two streams. One of them is that gender performativity is the ultimate liberatory ideal, or it is the complete debunking of any concept of selfhood, agency, and autonomy. So, another theory that this paper highlights on Butler is her theory of parody. So what is parody? Parody of performance for Butler is through drag or cross-dressing, which imitates the male and the female performance, which mocks the myth of the original genders or the binary genders, and it mobilizes the concept of gender. Critiques like Peter de Geyser says that Butler's notion of performativity is too pure to offer a theoretical account of identity or parodic subversion. And similar statements like this insinuate that Butler was blindsided to the limitations of her own theory, which is highly unlikely because when you read Gender Trouble, you see lines like this, which says gender is a kind of action. It can proliferate beyond the binary limits imposed by the apparent binary sex. But such an action will cause new vocabulary to emerge that will resist both binary and substantializing grammatical restrictions of gender. So this project as a whole to go beyond the binary is a vain utopian project because it's going to introduce new vocabulary, which will be too restrictive, which will not complement the restrictive binary. So she believes that homosexuality and heterosexuality are intersectional. I agree with this, but she is unable to provide any linguistic representation for non-binary genders. Her theory itself is structured within the heteronormative framework. So Butler also challenges Beauvoir's becoming through her definitions of gender performativity and parody that we talked about. But one of the best limitations that she shows is through Foucault's analysis of Herculean Barbet, to show how linguistic conventions that produce binary gendered cells find limitations when it comes to intersex identities, or he, she, which can be both, disrupts the laws of the system, or as she says, it deploys and redistributes the terms of the binary system. However, intersex identities provide no resolution to non-binary identities. Intersex or hermaphrodites do not maintain binary linguistic conventions, is true, but they do not challenge the binary system to open itself to a limitless multitude of gender possibilities as we see now in the 21st century. Being intersex is not a choice based on individuals' performance of gender or an acquired identity that Bourgeois talks about. So we come to a question that can a new form of linguistic representation be extended to non-binary gendered identities outside the he-she pronouns, which allows for gender to exist interchangeably within the masculine and feminine acts. This paper acknowledges that in the 21st century, the only introduction to a new set of vocabulary is the they-them pronouns, which can expand to marginalized genders, but there has not been enough substantial research and it is highly controversial itself. So now this paper utilizes Patriarchy and Satyajit's crossing to show the limitations of the monumental works by Bourgeois and Butler, which are monumental in feminism and gender discourses. However, Patriarchy and Satyajit's book Crossing focuses how gender as a discourse in the 21st century has introduced the non-binary gender possibilities. And we analyze this through 4 focal characters, Agim and Tanja in pairs, and Bujar and Sandy. So 4 of them are all ambiguous gender identities. They operate inside and outside the binary system. He outlines becoming through the tales of Albanian culture that Bujar, the protagonist's father, had imparted to him during his childhood. So Agim and Tanja are the first pair that we're going to talk about. The assumption that this paper makes is that they are transsexuals. So Beauvoir did not talk about transsexuals per se. She could not, because becoming cannot highlight the existence of other gendered possibilities in opposition to their sex. Butler did talk about transsexuals very apparently. She said that they operate as a discontinuity between the literal body and the culturally instituted fantasized body. So the first character we're going to talk about is Agim, who is a character that shows the cruelty of political strife on marginalized citizens of Albania. He's not a character that you can focus too much on when it comes to gender, but Agim desires to be a woman, and we're told that numerous times in the novel, as you can see from different quotes in different pages. His characterization is reminiscent of a myth of Ilir Jakupi. So Ilir's hamartia was that he had feminine attributes, and he is defined as a quiet, sensitive boy, and his sacrifice for his family was not the sacrifice of a true man. So the moral of Ilir's story is that it glorifies masculine traits that are hegemonic and socially destructive. So it is vindictive of the becoming of a male to a female gender. Agim is also abused by his father, like Ilir, for behaving like a girl. But if you read the novel, you see that Agim is not a passive character. He makes very important decisions that moves the plot. So he goes through abject poverty because of the political climate in Albania at that time. So it disables him to stylize his body with feminine characteristics. But through sheer free will, he is able to become a woman by constantly declaring that I am a woman, I am a girl. The next very interesting character is Tanja, who Statovci describes as a girl in a boy's body, incomplete and still on her way to achieving her final form. When we talk about this quote, you have to see that the essential word in this is body. So what is body? For Beauvoir, the female body must present the inert and passive qualities of an object. For Butler, it is a distinction between a fantasized body and a sex body. The fantasized body is imagined condition of desires which exceeds the physical body. Through Butler, we can understand the Statovci meant that the fantasized body endeavors to gain physicality but results in Tanja's depression and inferiority complex. So why does this happen? Because Tanja is a character that considers genital reconstructive surgery to transform into a woman. This is reminiscent of the myth of Aldona Dawn that, again, Jar's father talks about. So it is the myth of a woman who transformed into a man anatomically after cross-dressing as a man failed to help her consummate with the king's daughter. The moral of the story is at the very last dialogue that Aldona's father tells her. or him, is that why ask the king for a horse when you already have one? So the horse is the symbol of the phallus. My paper discusses the phallus in great details from the perspectives of one Butler, but basically Butler talks about how the man objectifies his independent consciousness by identifying with the sex organ, and how Butler uses the class concept of the phallus as a woman being the phallus and men having the phallus. But there can be no reciprocity or synthesis between the two sexes. Statovci enabled Aldona to acquire the male gender identity Don. He says that performance enabled Aldona to acquire her to become Don, much like how Tom and Tanja happened. And this identity that you gain from performance is equally legitimate to the identity you're provided by sex, because sex must be separate from gender. So now we come to the question how to challenge binary systems then. Tanja and Amin prove that the category of sex is a name that enslaves, because one cannot possibly operate within the oppressive linguistic discourse that deprives them of their speech. So what Statovci does is that he kills Alim and Tanja in the novel to introduce Sandy and Gujar, because they challenge the binary system ontologically and linguistically. So Sandy Ho is the drag queen in this novel, and he appears for a very short period of time, for one chapter only. So Sandy is described as, in drag, is described using the words artificial, dramatic, glitter, in a skin-tight black sequin dress and PVC boots. So Butler defined drag as a gender parody that critiques the three dimensions of corporeality: sex, gender identity, and gender performance. So Sandy retains a male gendered identity while performing feminine acts, which dismantles our preconceived notion that the appearance of the doer of the deed determines the identity. He says this very important quote to Gujar to explain drag to him in the novel, which says, "Drag is different. It's art. It's one of the most complicated forms of self-expression. Drag is the royalty of gender. It's being above gender by performing all genders at once." This line alludes to how gender is not a performance of a gender identity. Drag is not a gender identity. It is a form of self-expression which must be distinct from a gender identity. The limitations of parody is that parody cannot deconstruct or recontextualize binary genders because it merely mocks the myth of originality or original genders. Butler, when she says that drag constitutes a fluidity of identities that suggests the openness to resignification and recontextualization, we're left disappointed and unconvinced, because to exist outside the binary, do individuals need to turn to mockery or even eradication of heterosexuality? Now we come to the protagonist of the novel, Gujar. Gujar challenges Butler's notion of gender performativity and parody. He begins by saying that instead of being a man or a woman, wouldn't it be better to concentrate on being unique? So for Statovci, uniqueness is a quality that cannot coexist with binary. And Gujar never distinctly articulates what he means by unique. But he indicates that the binary genders are superfluous to him. The statement that instead of being a man or a woman is reminiscent of Gail Rubin's concept of overthrowing gender itself due to the rise of bisexuality and homosexuality in the 20th century. But Butler says that Gail Rubin's concept is a utopian state in infantile development. In the 21st century, I agree that gender is not a cultural transformation of biological polysexuality that Rubin pointed out. But for the emergence of non-binary identities, it has pushed her concept out of the infantile state. Because characters like Gujar unifies masculine and feminine attributes and experiences. He performs feminine acts, but that does not equate to becoming a woman. He feels discomfort in traditional masculine acts or gestures, but he also wants to validate the beauty of his male body. So he says a line like, "I'm so ugly," I say, and I take my clothes off, and I'm pretty, I say that, so beautiful, and that I find the strength to stand up and start again from the beginning, invincible. So that is when he talks about his male body. So the first claim that my paper makes is that Gujar is classified as a non-binary at the start of the novel, because he says a line that, are you a man or a woman? Sometimes I tell them I'm a man, sometimes I say I'm a woman. Sometimes I don't answer them at all. They're eager to construct me, and once I have given them an answer, order is finally restored to the world. I can choose what I am, I can choose my gender. A second claim is that he does not parody the binaries or merely cross-dresses, as the title of the novel suggests, crossing, because a vital incident in the novel needs to be pointed out. It is when Gujar is in a heterosexual relationship where he's very happy, but he still secretly dresses in Rosa's clothes. When Rosa finds him in this, in wearing her clothes, she laughs at his female appearance and says, "You look so ugly as a woman." And this is very important because he dresses in her clothes secretly. This is a performance in hiding, without an audience, to imitate, to prove that he is not parodying any binary genders. So later on, Gujar claims that I look every bit as much of a woman as she does, and attacks Rosa because she won't obey me, her boyfriend. This proves that indeed gender is culturally constructed, because self-destructive hegemonic masculine traits that his father had glorified through Albanian tales erupt to the surface to protect his pride of being unique. So in conclusion, when we ask what is gender in the 21st century, Statovci redefines gender as culturally instituted, indeed, and is highly intersectional as well with race, class, and other experiences. But instead of a repetition of action, it can also function as a discontinuity of actions to open the possibilities of gender and to achieve uniqueness without the eradication of the concept of gender as a whole. Thank you.
Well done. I missed the first two papers. I'm so sorry. But I read your paper before. Yeah, all of your papers. Should I go first?
Yeah.
Did you guys? No, it's just an observation. Have you guys heard of a cyborg, a feminist cyborg, in post-humanist feminist readings? So, yeah, you know, like Donna Haraway's work, I'm sure you've probably read her. Some of you might have heard of her. So they're getting rid of all male, female, gender, binary, whatever identities altogether, and it's the sort of cyborg that sort of takes
It's kind of like a non-binary.
non-binary, non-humanist, post-humanist sort of critique of traditional feminism. And I was wondering, have you guys?
There's a Netflix.
Don't do any donor.
So there's a Netflix series, Love, Death, Robots, which has this like in very
It's a measure
of non-binary but
robots.
highly sexualized. But even then, it's a non-binary.
So my question is, where do you think? Where's the future of these gender identities or performative roles are going to go? In the coming years, you know, AI is sort of taking hold of so many things and places and jobs.
I mean, Gail Rubin, she does talk about the utopian state where it would be like a eradication of all gender identities.
Right.
But I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I think it might happen in the future when everyone is cyborgs and all of that, but not right now.
Half human, half machine.
Sure.
What happens to your anatomy then?
That's very
Are you
Frankenstein.
half robot there and human here?
It's very interesting because like there's a repressed sexuality to that as well, right? We're not identifying these cyborgs with their genitals, but at the same time we're kind of molding their bodies or somehow identifying them with a gendered identity, but still not identifying
But
them.
then again, the distinction of gender and sex comes in, because if you are not anatomically, anatomically different, so it's difficult to determine the sex here. But gender is something that I think psychologically belong to or psychologically relate to. So that's something, even if we are half human, half cyborg, so that depends on the context of that.
Since the 20th century, they actually did, there was a radical distinction between sex and gender
already. Yeah.
I think even if we don't term them as any gender or any sex, the consumerist industry will.
Yeah.
Also, and they actually need to sell their products
And
to a particular gender group, and I think they're gonna actually term it at one point.
Actually, they have started this. I know something. In Japan, there is a
Yeah.
man who married Hasin AI projector. So he actually, there's a movie about it. And there's a biography on him. But why did you marry this AI thing, who is not even real? Hologram just. She's just a hologram.
Yeah.
And according to him, he said that she does understand him. He is in love with her
Yeah.
and
I think I've
they
seen it. Yeah.
so even if they create robots, they actually do sexualize robots. We have seen some of the movies like it was another American movie of Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Six, Number Six.
Is he still around? Right.
So even we can see that they
Yeah.
have give body proportions to women's and female robots
Right.
and male robots.
Yeah.
So yes, this is they can actually take this to next level
Yeah.
to just to show commercial or in case of marketing to sell
Yeah.
this type.
What happens to reproduction then?
It will actually go on.
because even now it's a huge talk. It's a huge issue in the two developed countries like there, Japan, China. There are rules about reproduction because women don't want to have children about all these issues. So if we don't even have the anatomy to have children, so there is a possibility it's an apocalyptic vision, or we are just making robots or something, not children anymore.
Right.
When we talk about reproduction
Yeah.
and all that, we're going back into sex. We're not talking about a gender.
Gender, yeah. Anything
Or observations.
Alright, then
I can't share anything because
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm just very happy that the course spawned such variety of.
You guys should publish your papers or get it ready for publication.
I think
Alright, next.
Thank you.